Welcome to the world of scale modeling with Mike Ashe, where techniques, tips, and creativity come alive with dozens of tutorials, projects, tape-up reviews, and picture references to help you build better scale models and enjoy our wonderful hobby. Welcome to Part 6 of our 7-part series on super detailing the Tamiya 1:350th scale USS Missouri. In Part 6, we'll continue with the airbrushing of the parts and we'll start doing some parts assemblies. So, let's get started. The 16-inch turrets were airbrushed with flat gold gray first. The parts were flipped so that the undersides also got a good coat of paint. Each turret was carefully masked for the application of the deck blue color. The turret tops now have a nice deck blue color with a coat of Tester's dull coat. The 40mm Beaufort platforms that sit on top of turrets 2 and 3 will be glued into place with tiny drops of white glue, which sticks very well to flat paint. Small strips of masking tape were wrapped around the ends of the barrels where they meet the blast bags, and then the blast bags were airbrushed with flat black with a little bit of flat white added to lighten up the black color. The blast bags were lightly dry brushed with flat white, and then the first barrel extension was painted chrome with a small, flat brush. The 5-inch 38 turrets were primed, and they are now ready for the deck blue color. The tops and the upper angle on the turrets were airbrushed with 2 coats of deck blue. Be sure to get the inside areas of the covers on the tops of the turrets. The area around the cover and the delicate aiming ring were masked first, then remaining areas were masked. Each turret was elevated so that the underside of the ladder detail was also painted. They were then airbrushed flat gold gray. The turrets are done, and a little touch-up will be needed in a few areas. A coat of Tester's dull coat was applied, and now the turrets are ready for their guns. The best way to airbrush small parts is to attach them to balsa wood strips with masking tape that is folded over onto itself. Also, be sure to add part numbers where needed. After the parts have dried, remove them, apply new masking tape, and then flip the parts to airbrush the underside areas. Positioning parts that are the same shape in one direction makes airbrushing easier as it minimizes the rotations of the balsa wood strips while airbrushing. These parts have been flipped and airbrushed, and they are ready to be attached. These parts will have deck blue tops and flat gold gray sides. The deck blue color is airbrushed onto the surfaces first. Although the stems on these vents have very small diameters, they stick well to masking tape. The parts with the deck blue tops were flipped and carefully placed onto new masking tape. Airbrushing was done at 15 psi to minimize any potential for paint bleeding under the masking tape. Photo etch parts and railings can be airbrushed the same way as plastic parts. Use the tip of a number 11 X-Acto blade to remove the railings where they attach to the masking tape and carefully peel them off so the railings won't be bent. Long straight railing links can be airbrushed by slightly curving them while attaching them to masking tape. This prevents them from falling over while being airbrushed. The whaleboat bottoms were masked with thin strips of tape, and then larger strips were added. The whaleboat propellers were painted brass, and the tiller handles were painted with a leather color. The cables on the crane were painted flat black, and the hooks were painted brass. The propellers were airbrushed brass and then given a coat of Tester's dull coat to tone down the brass color. The gold medal models, fire hoses, and hydrants were detail painted with the tips of round toothpicks while still attached to their brass trees. The insides of the black cap models' 3D printed searchlights were painted silver with the tip of a round toothpick. The rope detail on these 3D printed reels were painted with a leather color using a tiny detail brush. The anchor chain brake wheels have 0.025-inch diameter rod that is 3/16 of an inch long superglued to their centers. The rod was then painted flat gold gray with a detail brush. The chain brake wheel assemblies were removed from the photo etch sheet and the wheels were painted flat red with a round toothpick. Now that all the parts are painted, a final fit check will ensure that everything is painted the correct color. Some positioning stubs needed to have their paint scraped off to get them to fit into their corresponding holes. The forward superstructure looks pretty good. The aft area also looks pretty good. The overall appearance of the model and the colors have passed the visual test, and now it's time to start the assembly and rigging process. The propeller assemblies were glued into place first, and then the propellers were added. The rudders were then attached, and the model was mounted on its display base. The minesweep chain was positioned first and then glued into place with tiny drops of white glue. The anchor chains were airbrushed flat black and then carefully positioned and attached again with tiny drops of white glue. The gold medal model's 40mm Boffer ammo rack tabs were bent into shape, positioned, and attached with tiny drops of white glue. The black cap model's 40mm quad Boffer assemblies fit perfectly inside the gun tubs, and the ammo racks do not interfere with the guns. The gold medal model's 20mm gun box tops were attached with white glue. The forward 40mm Boffer tubs were then attached. Note the holes for the chain brakes. The kit's gas bottles were attached with white glue, and some extra ones were located over areas where there were minor flaws. The 40mm ammo racks were also installed throughout the superstructure. The aft deck details were all attached with tiny drops of white glue. The aft 40mm ammo racks, the Mark 51 director tubs, and the life wraps were all attached with white glue. The gold medal model's gangways were stowed against the aft superstructure sides. Some of the 40mm ammo racks on the upper Bofors platform needed some tweaking to get them to fit better. The forward superstructure is being built up, railings are being added, and the mid-level 20mm platforms have been installed. A detail brush was used to apply flat gold gray to the areas where the arrows are between the bottoms of the railings and the upper edges of the superstructure sides. Here again, a detail brush was used to paint the outer edges of the railings flat gold gray. The railings were installed with superglue, and there is always bleeding of the glue onto the deck areas. Once the assemblies are airbrushed with a coat of Tester's dull coat, the superglue will disappear. The Edward exact fit railings at this location had to be carefully trimmed around the box, which is at the edge of the deck. Masking tape was applied to the raised location line for the upper superstructure part, and the assembly was airbrushed with Tester's dull coat. Flat gold gray was applied to the outer edges of the railings where they attached to the deck with a detail brush. The forward smokestack assembly is now ready to be installed. The lower railings and the incline ladders have been installed, and this area is now ready for the upper superstructure parts. The lower aft railings and incline ladders have also now been installed. The mid-level superstructure assembly is installed, as well as some of the 20mm guns and the small searchlights. The aft tower is installed, along with all the other deck details. The buildup of the upper mid-level superstructure is complete, and some small parts have been added to this area. The railings behind turret number 2 have been attached. The fire hoses were positioned using the flat end of a toothpick that was dampened. Tiny drops of white glue were used to glue them into place. This concludes Part 6 of our 7-part series on super detailing the 1 to 3/50th scale Tamiya USS Missouri. Stay tuned for Part 7, where we complete all the assemblies and I show you some close-up photography. I've also included a link to my website where you can get a free PDF download of all of the pictures and captions associated with this great project. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give us a thumbs up. And when you get the chance, visit our website at www.mikeashley.com, where you're going to find dozens of free PDF downloads, including tutorials, picture references, model galleries, projects, and my 5 original scale modeling books. Thanks to Ben Sound and Videvo for the royalty-free music, and happy scale modeling!